It's the summer of 2011, and the Penguins have one special UFA in their sights. He's old, he's entering his age 39 season, and he's been out of the NHL since 2008. But Jaromir Jagr is still a beast. Jagr was the Penguins' captain and best player during some of their most dire seasons. Seasons where the team needed wins, especially in the playoffs, to even stay in Pittsburgh. The Pens never missed the playoffs under Jagr's watch, as he won 5 scoring titles, 2 Pearson Awards, and an MVP throughout his mid to late 20s. But Jagr's time in Pittsburgh ended in an ugly divorce. Mario's unretirement caused some friction between the Czech and the Pens, but the team's purse strings were tight as ever, and support around the terrific top of the Penguins lineup was thinning by the day. In December of 2000, Jagr declared that he felt like he was dying alive in Pittsburgh as they muddled through a winless streak. Trade requests from Jagr's camp came, and after the Penguins' improbable run to the conference finals in 2001, Jagr was traded for pennies on the dollar to the Capitals in the form of soon-to-be busts Chris Beach, Ross Lupachuk, and Michael Civic. The less said about the early 2000s Penguins, and frankly Jagr's run with the Capitals, the better. But after the lockout, both returned to form, as the Pens got Crosby and Malkin, and Jagr ascended to superstardom once again with the Rangers. While the Penguins won their Stanley Cup in 2009, Jagr was in the newly rechristened KHL with Avangard Omsk. However, here in the 2011 offseason, there's a rumor that Jagr might just want to come back to the NHL. Specifically, that he wants to come back to Pittsburgh. Jagr Watch is on. No trades on draft night, and given the Penguins' position, they don't gain any immediate help. But defenseman Joe Morrow of the Portland Winterhawks seems like a good ad. Once again, it's contracts that are front and center for the Penguins, as almost every depth forward needs a new deal. Out of this group, the Penguins elect to keep Pascal Dupuis, Aaron Asham, and Craig Adams. They also give RFA Tyler Kennedy a big raise. Max Talbot is probably the most difficult departure as he heads to the Flyers for how long? Hey, get your money, Max. We've got planes to track. Now we look to Josh Yohe's 2020 article for The Athletic on the Jagr Watch phenomenon. It began with a text to Penguins management from Jagr's agent Peter Svoboda. Would you be interested in Jagr playing for you? Svoboda tells the Penguins that the contract would be cheap, likely around $800K or $1 million. Just 1 year. A prove-it deal. A reunion discount. Sure, why not? But as word starts to get around the league that Jagr is coming back, more teams express interest, and the contract demands head starkly upward. But surely, Jagr was still going to take a hometown discount in Pittsburgh. In fact, here comes his flight from New York to Pittsburgh in the middle of the night. I mean, we don't know for sure that it's him, but who else would it be? Fans pack Pittsburgh International Airport waiting for Jagr, but are met only with Bob Nutting, the miserly and widely loathed owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Well, maybe Jagr won't sign in Pittsburgh, that's fine, I guess. What isn't fine is who Jagr signs with. A 1-year, $3.3 million deal with the Philadelphia Flyers.
And a goal! He has his first! He scores!
What a punch in the gut. What an insult to a city that so badly wanted reconciliation with the man who was once many of their inhabitants' favorite player. There will be no warm reception in Pittsburgh for Jagr. Only booze.
Here's the thing. I don't think Ray Shero was that interested in landing Jagr. I don't, as Ray told me during that week, I forget the vulgar language that he used because he was always good for that, but he basically said, I'm not from Pittsburgh, so I don't give a shit about the romanticism involved in this. I'm trying to win Stanley Cups, which was fair. I mean, that was his job. He offered Jagr a contract. They offered him 1 year, $2 million. I can tell you this, Dan Bilesma wanted him badly. He was really excited about it. Shero was not. I'll never forget the draft was in Minnesota in 2011. And I asked Bilesma about Jagr just in a private conversation. Bilesma takes a piece of paper out of his pants, gets a pen, and he actually writes down the power play configuration that he had in mind already. He already had it in mind. Like he moved Malkin to the left point. Jagr would be down low on the goal line. Sid would be on the high right wing wall. Like he had it all, planned out what he was going to do. What he was excited, and he really thought it was going to happen, as did a lot of us and a lot of people in the fan base. It would have been a great story. I wish it would have happened, but was not meant to be.
To the UFA bargain bin, the cap-strapped Penguins go. What about a gently used Steve Sullivan? He's old and small, but he can still play, especially on the power play where the Penguins were anemic in 2011. Steve McIntyre will take Goddard's place as the punching guy. He's a marginally worse player, but let's be real, his skill is not why he's on the team. Jason Williams, white chocolate? He was sick, man. Had some crazy highlight. What's up? So apparently this is not the retired NBA point guard. Different guy. Finally, Richard Park, who made his debut in 1995 as an 18-year-old with the Penguins, and since has blossomed into an extremely reliable bottom six center with a bit of offensive punch. The catch is he spent last season with Ambry Piotta in the Swiss League. The players in and out are a net, not much better, not much worse, which is probably fine for a team that just wants their guys healthy. Finally, some good news for Sid. He's participating in training camp. He even played in a scrimmage. He won't be back for opening night, but he will come back, and fairly soon. Night 1 in Vancouver, Bilesma sticks James Neal on Malkin's wing. Maybe that'll get James going.
Slam it to the near corner to Neal. Turns and shoots and it goes in. Off the goaltender Luongo. And James Neal connects.
The Penguins defeat the defending President's Trophy and Western Conference winning Canucks, buoyed by 2 goals by Matt Cook. The rest of the Penguins' start to the season is fine as they go 3-2-2 throughout their first 7 games, but then they find their stride and reel off 5 straight wins. Neal and Malkin are unstoppable together. The rangy playmaker Malkin feeds beautiful passes to the real deal, as he's been deigned, who fires them home to the tune of 9 goals in the Penguins' first 12 games. Jordan Staal, Chris Kunitz, and Pascal Dupuis have each had great starts to the season as well. The defense is sound, and the goalies have done all you could ask for. More importantly, Matt Cook only has 4 penalty minutes. The man is reformed. But after the streak, the Penguins settle in as kinda mid. Not bad, really, but some close games just aren't falling the right way. Mark Letestu gets traded for a 4th if you have an opinion on that kind of thing. But how the Pens are playing goes on the back burner, because he's back.
Obviously, we're here to celebrate the return of Sidney Crosby and to answer that simple question, how's he look?
Coaches Tony Granato and Todd Reardon.
Eric England off the defense, moves the puck to center. Here's Crosby with a burst of speed, up the middle, gets open and scores! Welcome back, Sid!
The city of Pittsburgh can breathe. The Penguins aren't unbeatable with Sid back as they search to find new balance in their lines while Mark has regressed from terrific to average. Alright, so we gotta figure this out. So Neal can stay with Malkin, but Crosby gets Kunitz. Gino, you can have Sullivan back, but Sid gets Dupuis. Jordan, you're back with your old guys in your shutdown role. Sorry, buddy. You've been great in the top 6. There just isn't room for you up there. In late November, Chris Letang, while scoring a game winner, is concussed on a blindside hit from Max Pacioretty. The Canadiens' power forward is suspended for 3 games. Ironically, by the precedent put in place after Matt Cook's hit on Mark Savard didn't result in a suspension. Letang will be out for a while. A real shame given how well he's played. Truly stepping up as not just the Pens' number 1, but as a top 10 D-man in the league. With his play especially elevated alongside Paul Martin, who has certainly figured it out. Well, at least Sid's back.
And I guess you could say that the success here in Pittsburgh, a little Biles magic has rubbed off. A collision at center between Kunitz and Sidney Crosby, and Sid's getting up very slowly.
Broken jaw, he's out 2 games. Honestly, I would hesitate to play him against the Flyers while he's still getting his feet underneath him anyway. Who knows what some idiot like Zach Ronaldo would try and pull. And keeping him out against the Islanders...
They have some words. And then Tangradi and Gillies. And Tangradi turtles.
Yeah, exactly. After losing to the Flyers and beating the Islanders, the Penguins are 30 games into the season with a record of 17-9-4. Perfectly good, but there's bad news. Crosby's concussion symptoms have returned. There's no recovery timetable.
You had an interesting thing on that team because you had a bunch of older guys who were old school, and they always felt like there should be a captain on the ice. And if the captain's not playing all year, then somebody should be the temporary captain, basically. Like for Penguins fans old enough to remember when Mario Lemieux would be out with his back injuries, which was quite often. Ron Francis or Brian Trottier would, or Paul Coffey all wore the C at times when he wasn't around. You don't really see that these days, of course. Things are different. As the story goes, there were people in the trainer's room talking. I think it was Craig Adams and Jordan Stahl were involved, and Matt Cook. And, Fleury and Malkin, they were all in there just kind of, chatting. And it was brought up at one point, and Malkin very quickly said, "This is stupid," says the captain, and he walked out of the room, and that was that. I don't really think it was close to happening. I do think, though, that from the older guys on that team, there was some frustration. Like, why isn't this guy playing? He practices against us every day. And that's just coming from a different generation. You hear people talk about boomers. Those were essentially like the boomers on the team. Like they just didn't understand that these concussions were actually a big deal. And he was going through a life-altering situation.
Now down 2 stars, the Penguins lose twice, but then they get their feet underneath them and put together 4 wins with the piecemeal lineup. Then they begin to circle the drain. They lose a concerning 6 games in a row. Each loss is to an eventual playoff team, but still, playoff teams are who you have to play in the playoffs. Oh, and by the way, Jordan Stahl went down in Game 3 of the streak when he got tangled with old Mike Rupp. It's hitting the fan. The Pens can't score, managing just 6 goals in the 6 losses, which is certainly bad. However, a look under the hood shows that this team is in the PDO dumpster. A 91.6 PDO isn't going to stick for long. The dam has got to break. And there it goes.
Game, or at least the one the Penguins would win handily. Here's a shot by Malkin, he scores! There's the goal by Malkin on the backhand, and the Penguins retake the lead.
10 goals from Malkin during the 8-game winning streak. 6 from Neal. Letang is healthy. The goaltending is still meh, but who cares? We're back, baby.
Comes Neal with Gino alongside. Shoots and scores! James Neal! Surprising!
They cool off on their way to the deadline, but they do have a wild 8-5 game against the Jets. That's fun. The deadline itself, not just for the Pens, but around the league, is mediocre. Crosby is still in limbo, so no one really knows what the Penguins' cap situation is. Now, what they could and probably should do is say, hey, Sid, maybe wait until the playoffs to come back. We can really load up on guys. But while this idea makes sense in a vacuum, I understand why the Penguins don't do it. One, the upcoming draft is in Pittsburgh, so according to Dave Molinari of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the Pens don't really want to move their first-round pick. 2, Sid, his health, and his presence are more important to this franchise than adding a guy or two at the deadline that likely wouldn't move the needle.
I was working for a newspaper called the Tribune Review at the time, and my bosses, this is one of the biggest regrets of my career, my bosses basically ordered me to write an article that I didn't want to write. And the article was intended to put pressure on Sidney Crosby to either come back or to tell the Penguins, hey, I'm not coming back, so you better go trade for somebody in the meantime. Didn't want to write it. I wrote it because, sometimes your bosses tell you to do something. You don't. In retrospect, I should have just said no, but I didn't. So the next night, we're in Washington. For Pittsburgh fans, it was the day after the Tim Tebow playoff game. So I'm in Washington. I'm watching the game in the press box. At the end of the first period, a Penguins official comes up to me and says, hey, Sid wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh, shit. And I had like a really good relationship with Sid, and I knew he wouldn't be happy. So he was in a private box, and I ended up watching the entire second period with him, and we just talked for about an hour. And he very directly, vulnerably told me that he wants to be playing. Usually he feels like he's good enough that he can play, but every time he would feel better, he would just get these headaches that were just awful. And he like almost blacked out in the shower one day, And there's just like his sister had to help him get out of the shower because he like almost passed out in the shower. Like all this crazy stuff was happening.
The Pens are still connected to a couple people, and the Penguin Poop blog that I really wish was named something else, but no shade, lays out a few targets. Paul Gaustad, big guy, wins faceoffs, can sometimes provide some offense, but not very often. Nikolai Kulemin scored 30 goals last year. Would be lucky to score 30 points this year. He grew up with Malkin, but does Malkin need him now? David Jones, probably the most interesting player of the bunch, which is not saying much, but he can score a little. In classic NHL rumor fashion, two of those guys, Kulemin and Jones, don't even move, and the other, Gaustad, goes for a crazy price. The Penguins do not add at all, which would probably have people screaming, crying, and throwing up if a 100-plus point team did that in today's NHL. I guess the Pens were on a 3-game winning streak coming into deadline day, and Stahl is back, so who knows? Maybe it was the right decision. The Penguins extend their 3-game streak to 11 games, disrupted only by the Flyers. And finally, for real this time, Sid is back and here to stay. Malkin wins the scoring race by a mile with 109 points, and the returning captain helps the Penguins at the tail end of their win streak and helps them finish the season strong. 108 points, the second highest total in franchise history, the second most in the Eastern Conference, and good for the 4th seed because of this stupid-ass playoff system. The Rangers had one more overtime loss than the Penguins. And since they're in the same division, womp womp, sorry Penguins. You don't get to play the making Ovi play defense Capitals like your record theoretically deserves. You instead get... no. As you may have picked up on, the Flyers, who themselves are a 103-point team, have easily handled the Penguins this season, winning 4 of the team's 6 meetings and scoring frequently. These teams also hate each other. They aren't just rivals, cross-state, blah blah, no. The rivalry has been at that simmering level before, but not now. These are two teams that, almost as badly as they want to win, want each other to lose. This was best exemplified on April 1st, where a nationally televised game between the two teams turned into a bloodbath after Penguin Joe Vitale laid out Danny Briere in garbage time. A brawl ensued, and while the fights took place on the ice, Flyers coach Peter Laviolette and Penguins assistant coach Tony Granato scaled the benches on either side of Pierre Maguire and began screaming at each other. Laviolette tight-roped out to point an accusatory finger at Granato and Bosma behind him, but was eventually yanked behind Flyers assistant, the still threatening Craig Berube. Stat-wise, these teams are extremely similar, with the Flyers being a touch worse in most regards. The Penguins are first in the league in goals for and 12th in goals against, while the Flyers are 3rd and 21st, respectively. The teams have almost the same power play percentage, they have the exact same save percentage. The Penguins are 4th in the league on 5-on-5 expected goals percentage, the Flyers are 8th. The only clear divide is the penalty kill, where the Pens are vastly superior, and on 5-on-5 save percentage, where the Flyers have the edge. Zooming in a bit, who makes up this Flyers team? No Mike Richards or Jeff Carter, who were longtime cornerstones of this rivalry. Braden Shen, Wayne Simmons, Sean Couturier, and Jacob Voracek were obtained in exchange for Richards and Carter, and while they aren't a massive net gain at this point in their careers, they have made the Flyers much deeper. There's of course Jagr, who has put together a season more than worthy of his contract, as has Max Talbot. Danny Briere can't really say the same, but he's a demon in the playoffs. Scott Hartnell and Matt Reed are great finishers, likely elevated by the Flyers' many talented distributors, chief among whom is Claude Giroux. Giroux has become a borderline superstar over the past year. 3rd in the league in points, 2nd in assists, 3rd in primary assists. He drives the bus for the Flyers, especially on the power play, where he led the league in assists and points. The Flyers D has plenty of solid players. They don't have a dominant number 1 like Letang, but Matt Carl and Kimmo Timonen are very good with genuinely spectacular analytic profiles. Goaltending is a little scary for Philadelphia. Sergei Bobrovsky, the Flyers starter in 2011, has fallen off massively and has been supplanted by Ilya Bryzgalov. Philly's huge addition in free agency. Briz is a weird guy and hasn't been particularly good with the Flyers.
Leave me alone, guys.
By goals saved above expected, he's fine, almost dead average. But can you really say the Penguins have a big advantage in net? Fleury has, like Briz, been pretty close to average. He's saved a couple goals above expected and has, quite frankly, nowhere near the regular season track record that Brizgalov has. Both goalies have had years where they were awesome in the playoffs, and both are coming off 2 postseason duds. Something of note, Briz has been hot. A .921 save percentage in his last 10 starts, while Fleury has not, with a paltry .894. It's a toss-up in net, is what I'm saying. Game 1, Consol Energy Center, an arena where the Flyers have a 5-1 record. The Penguins immediately commence beating their rivals' brains in. Crosby, Kennedy, Dupuis, with points now in 18 straight games. 3-0 just after the first. Oh yeah, the Penguins are just better, especially fully healthy, well, except Matt Niskanen, firing on all cylinders. Philly is cooked. Claude Giroux taking stupid penalties, it's over.
Could not be handled by Vitale, pushed on back, and it's a chance around in front for Briere, he scores!
That was offside. By a mile. I hate offside review, but this is the kind of horrific missed call that will bless us with that innovation. Whatever, it shouldn't matter. See, look, there's Zach Ronaldo being a fool. Briere tightens the game in the third with another goal, this one legal, and I don't think Fleury ever saw it as he's screened by Crosby. Braden Shen against Letang and Engelland, probably the worst possible pairing in a penalty kill situation, ties the game on a tip. No real chance for Mark. Well, this sucks, but the Pens have owned this game. They just need 1 goal, and Brizgalov has not exactly inspired confidence, even after the first.
Fleury in goal. Another try in front. Oh, it's deflected. They score! Voracek!
Not good. Very bad, even. Letang, Fleury, and even the normally dependable Stahl were asleep at the wheel on Voracek's winner. Just 1 game, whatever. Move forward, split the series. 15 seconds into game 2, Sid.
Crosby shoots, he scores! Just 15 seconds in!
Kunitz lengthens the lead, and people start to come to the realization that Brizgalov is not on his A-game. The Laviolette timeout is called. Suddenly, Briz is making a 10-bell save on Letang. Immediately after the save, Giroux drives down to the Penguins' end, Fleury spins out, and old friend Max Talbot cashes in. But the Penguins don't falter. Paul Martin rifles a shot home to make the game 3-1 in the waning moments of the first. In the second, after a careless Crosby interference penalty, Claude Giroux just shoots it in on a power play to cut into the lead. Again, shorthanded, again Claude Giroux on just a shot. The Penguins have blown another early lead in embarrassing fashion. But the response is immediate. Brizgalov is lost at sea, and Kunitz dunks one home to re-establish the Penguins' advantage. 2 seconds left in the period, Sean Couturier, the game is tied. Again. The response, again, is immediate. Tyler Kennedy on a nothing shot. Guys, Briz sucks. I'm willing to declare it. And Mark?
Have had leads of 2-0, 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier.
Mark, they're doing everything they can for you, buddy. Mark, please, man. Why are there 4 forwards on the ice? Mark!
Here's Giroux with Couturier. Giroux in front, score! A hat trick for Sean Couturier.
So it has become abundantly clear that this series, though the teams are evenly matched, will be determined by which goalie sucks less. And the Penguins are certainly in a hole. Game 3, Jordan Stahl opens the scoring, but I'm not sure I'm ready to trust again.
A shot is fought off there, and the rebound's got it!
Are you kidding me? The rest of the Penguins are starting to melt down. I don't know if it's being in Wells Fargo Center that's breaking their brains or just underlying frustration, but stupid penalties are frequent. Another 2 Briere goals. The Penguins are getting slaughtered off the rush. The defense, which has been so solid, is being exposed for their lack of speed, especially Orpik and McCulloch, who now have to play even more because Letang just got himself tossed. But the main event is Crosby and Giroux.
And they start letting them go.
The Flyers couldn't have drawn this up any better. There goes Aaron Asham with a match penalty, but James Neal scores a masterful goal to remind everyone that there is still hockey going on.
Poked it through and got there. He scores! Neal!
The Penguins are down just 1. They're still in this.
Spiked away out front. Reed! He scores!
Dan, you gotta get Brent Johnson warming up in the bullpen. He was really bad this year, but there comes a point where you have to do something. Bilesma elects to stick with Fleury, and once again, Neal brings his Pens within 1. Oh, sorry Penguins, you're getting your lunch eaten by Matt Reed. But remember everyone, Brizgalov isn't good. Do you remember? Remember he stinks? Jordan Staal brings his team within 1 once again, as the puck trickles by the statuesque Flyer goalie.
Some lumber from Adams, let it across to Simmons. Score!
Holy shit, Mark, make a save! Johnson comes in. The persistently jovial Fleury looks furious on the bench. Knowing him, his ire is likely directed solely at himself. Giroux scores immediately on Johnson, and that spells the end. More stupidity ensues. James Neal murders Sean Couturier for no reason, which should have certainly been a penalty, if not gotten Neal thrown out, but somehow it goes unpunished. Then, seconds later, Neal shows he's lost it. He runs from Montgomery County to hit Giroux in the head. Neal escaped onto the bench before the Flyers got to him, so as he's being skated at the penalty box, Wayne Simmons challenges him. In the background, Crosby goes after Scott Hartnell, and Hartnell and Craig Adams fight once, break up, then fight a second time, where Hartnell accuses Adams of pulling his hair. Even Sid has entered meltdown mode. By the end of the game, the Penguins' bench is nearly as empty as it was during fight night against the Islanders. In the post-game interviews, Crosby makes a declaration.
I don't like him.
Why don't you like him?
Because I don't like him. I don't like any guy on their team.
Claude Giroux scores an ugly goal almost immediately in Game 4. Fine. Good, even. I just want this to stop. I'm actually not even watching this game. I'm in a musical instead, about as far away from hockey as I can get. The Penguins, as they've done repeatedly throughout the series, respond quickly to Giroux's goal, with Malkin scoring as he hops out of the box. Niskanen even gives the Penguins the lead. The Penguins then parade to the penalty box, and the Flyers score twice on the power play. Now is probably time to point something out about Dan Bilesma. He does not adjust particularly well. His X's and O's, I mean. He can adapt to injuries, as he's proven time and time again. That's a great skill to have. During the regular season, where he isn't seeing the same team over and over, he doesn't really have to tweak and fine-tune, say, his penalty kill very much. But in the playoffs, where a team plays you repeatedly, watches film of you incessantly, and starts to figure out where your weaknesses are, you need to adjust. This is 2 years in a row now that the Penguins were spectacular on the PK in the regular season, where they have gotten their doors blown off while a man down in the playoffs. Would it help this year if they didn't have essentially a shooter-tooter back there? Sure, but the Penguins have given up 10 power play goals this series. That's unacceptable. Especially when it was Niskanen's goal just today that put the Penguins at a positive goal differential on their own power plays.
It was historically bad, and the Flyers did have a good power play, yes. But I thought it was Dan Bilesma's worst coaching performance, as great as he was the year before. They never adapted to what the Flyers were doing. They never changed anything.
Blame Fleury all you want. I certainly have. But Bilesma must do something to address his team getting slaughtered in the part of the game where he has the most impact. But it's probably too late in this series anyway. Wait, what's the score? The Penguins, on the back of a hat trick from Jordan Staal, have obliterated the Flyers in Game 4. Ronaldo threw a little fit. Brizgalov got pulled for the first time in this series, which in itself is amazing. Matt Cook got thrown out for being Matt Cook. He's reformed. He shouldn't still be treated like this. The game is great. Probably just delays the inevitable. But cool. That was fun. Game 5 in Pittsburgh is the second normal game of the series. And hey, James Neal is back from his suspension for his Game 3 antics. That's cool. Matt Carl opens the scoring, power play, of course, but Steve Sullivan answers. Scott Hartnell, who had been making his presence known mostly off the score sheet, scores on the power play, of course. Man, Orpik has had a tough series. But there's Jordan Stahl, continuing to elevate his play, tying the game. Stahl's line mate Tyler Kennedy scores the eventual game winner as Fleury shuts down the Flyers. Is this actually a series now? Is the better team just going to brute force their way forward? No. Claude Giroux barrels over Crosby seconds into Game 6, going on to score shortly after, completing what Flyers fans have since dubbed the shift. Fleury stinks. He hasn't really put together 3 good periods in any game. Brizgalov, inversely, is great. It's by far his best game of the series. 5-1, and the Penguins once again are headed home in the first round. There are no excuses this time. The Penguins were healthy. They should have won, and they didn't.
The Flyers were the one team that would have beaten them probably. They were in their heads at that point, for whatever, just that season. They were in their head time and time again. We saw evidence of it. And that Penguins team was arrogant too. They're really arrogant. When Sid came back on, I think it was March 15th in New York against the Rangers, he came back. And he was back for good then from the concussion. And the Penguins went on a winning streak. They looked unbeatable when he came back. If you go back and look late in that regular season, they were still winning almost every game. But instead of 4-1 or 5-2, the scores were like 7-5 and 8-4. They were giving up a lot of goals. They thought they could score their way to a championship. But they absolutely believed it. And we all kind of thought that. You can't do that. You just can't. Even the greatest offensive teams ever couldn't do that. And there was just an arrogance. They didn't want to change how they played because nobody's going to beat us 4 out of 7 the way we can score goals. And Philly proved that to be very much incorrect. You saw their immaturity on display, I thought, in that series. I'll never forget after Game 6. Two things happened after Game 6, which I will share. I saw Ray Shero having a conversation with Chris Letang outside of the team bus. And, it's one of those things where you don't hear every word in the conversation, but you're being kind of nosy and you hear a little bit. The point of the conversation was, you're a great player. You're going to be great in this league for a long time. You got to grow up a little bit. You got to stop letting teams like this get under your skin. That was what Ray was telling him. And the other thing I saw that I'll never forget, after that game, right outside of the Flyers locker room, I'm walking back to the press box, and I see Jaromir Jagr walk out of the locker room, and Mario Lemieux was there waiting to speak with him. And they had about a 10-minute conversation. I'll never forget it. Now, I wasn't going to be nosy with those two, so I gave them space, but I watched from afar. I just stayed in the hallway and was watching them, and they embraced at the end of the conversation, and I think that was their way of kind of making their peace after the previous summer and the Jagr watch stuff.
The Flyers move on. The op-eds start to roll in. Is Claude Giroux the real best player in the NHL? After the Devils beat the Flyers with little effort in round 2, those articles suddenly stop. The Penguins could have beaten those Devils. Right? Maybe not, with the goaltending. Before the Cup was even awarded, the Penguins addressed their major problem. The Pens sent a 7th-round pick to the Capitals for the rights to the guy who was Washington's starter for most of last season before his job was poached by upstart Braden Holtby. The Pens signed their new goalie to a 2-year deal worth $2 million per. He's not the superstar he once was, but Thomas Vokoun should really take some pressure off Fleury. Or maybe add some on. Malkin wins the Hart and Ted Lindsay awards, devoting the MVP to his best friend, Sergei Gonchar. Another problem has appeared, though. The Penguins are running out of money. Crosby and Stahl each only have 1 year left, and the Penguins already handed out new deals to Kunitz and Neal. Sullivan and Asham are likely to leave, but that's just a drop in the bucket. The Penguins don't just lack the ability to add players, they need to move money out. Jordan Staal seems like the man on the outside. He's a number 2, fringing on number 1 center entering his prime, and the Penguins certainly can't afford him past this upcoming season, though they do offer him a contract. But with his year of term left, the Penguins should be able to get good value for Staal in a trade. Players in return that, while worse, could fill the third-line center role at a much lower price. The only problem is the Penguins have no leverage. They need to move Staal's contract out, but the only place Staal has agreed to re-sign is Carolina, alongside his older brother Eric. This greatly lessens Staal's value to the 28 other teams who would just see him as a rental, meaning the only place the Penguins can get remotely fair value is from the Hurricanes. And frankly, I wouldn't expect fair value. At the 2012 draft in Pittsburgh, Ray Shero pulls the trigger. Staal is sent to Carolina, joining his brother, in exchange for a massive return. The primary piece is the 8th overall pick, which the Penguins used to select offensive juggernaut defenseman Derek Pouliot. Then there's Staal's day-to-day replacement in strong shooting, defensively responsible 23-year-old center Brandon Sutter. A true third-line center if there ever was one. Finally, throw in mid-tier prospect Brian Dumoulin, who was reportedly added just to make the deal more fair by Carolina GM Jim Rutherford.
Maybe Jim Rutherford knew he was going to be in Pittsburgh in a few years. Wanted to have him. I don't know. I love Jim Rutherford. He's my favorite executive ever to deal with. He's one of my favorite people on this earth. And when I really started to grow immense respect for him was during that time, because Ray Shero had no leverage. They offered Staal a massive contract. They offered him every dollar that Carolina offered. He turned it down. Jordan wanted to go play with his brother. Everybody knew it. And Jordan thought he was a top 2 center. And he wanted to go prove it in Raleigh. He'd won his cup in Pittsburgh. He didn't want to be the third fiddle all of his career. I get it. Okay. Everybody knew this. And instead of, making an unfair offer to Ray Shero, Jim Rutherford made a very fair hockey trade, which ended up being Brandon Sutter and the 8th overall pick who would become Derek Pouliot. That was a mistake, but still, 8th overall pick and Sutter, I think, would have been fair, given the circumstances. To throw in Dumoulin, who was a second-round pick and a pretty highly regarded guy, I always thought it was a great trade for the Penguins, and it was. And it was only a great trade because Jim Rutherford respected the game enough and respected the Penguins enough to not screw them over when he very easily could have. So I think that told you a lot about Jim. And years later, people would say, why does everyone trade with the Penguins? Why do they give Jim good deals? Why do they work well? Because people like him.
It's a subtraction today, but the deal greatly bolsters the Penguins' prospect pool and eases their cap situation, theoretically allowing them to be more cavalier in trading for other players. Michalek is a cap casualty too. The Czech D-man, while good, was starting to underperform his large contract in a crowded top 4. He goes back to Arizona for a third and minor league players. The Penguins finish out the front half of their draft by taking defenseman Olli Mata, centers Teddy Bluger and Oscar Sundqvist, and goalie Matt Murray. To show how eventful free agency is for the Pens, their big ad is Tanner Glass, a 28-year-old forward who scored his 10th career goal last year. Given the Penguins re-signed Steve McIntyre, I don't really get adding Glass, but whatever. Speaking of re-signing, Sid re-signs through 2025 at $8.7 million, essentially ensuring he'll be a Penguin for life. And Niskanen re-ups for 2 more years at $2.3 million per year, about half of the Michalek rate. Then the league shuts down. I've talked about it before. Games get canceled, the owners want more money, the players don't want to give it. Crosby is a vocal leader for the players, but they are eventually stamped out by the owners. Crosby's new contract wouldn't have been able to be signed under the new CBA, so it's good they got it done, I guess. The All-Star Game and Winter Classic were canceled, but games would officially start again in mid-January, as the NHL settled on a 48-game season. As a bit of an aside, this lockout is another gash into Crosby, Malkin, and even their rival Alex Ovechkin's career totals. ripping away another half year of their prime. Greedy billionaires suck, and the people who own the Penguins aren't exempt from that. Because Mario is only a multimillionaire and he doesn't count. Off the Penguins go to start the 2013 regular season with a lineup that is worse than last year's at every position except goaltender. Sullivan's departure leaves a hole in the top 6, and while McCulloch will be replaced by Matt Niskanen, who fills Niskanen's spot on the bottom pair? Neither slot has a great candidate to step up. Matt Cook in the top 6? Tyler Kennedy maybe? Rookie Bo Bennett? Is the bottom pair really going to be 2 of Derek Engelland, Simone Dupre, and Ben Lovejoy? That doesn't inspire a ton of confidence, but you have to remember something. This team, mostly without Sidney Crosby, waltzed to their second best record ever. The year before, missing both Crosby and Malkin for half the season, they managed 106 points. Though they lost pieces, they have 2 healthy, genuine superstars, a constantly improving elite defenseman, and a definitely tenable goaltending situation. This team, healthy, is better than the 2 previous years where the Pens were ground to a paste. The Penguins opened the season in Philadelphia against the Flyers and beat them 3-1. Fleury is quite good, which adds an extra layer to the victory. Game 2, the Penguins handled the short-lived Rick Nash and Marian Gaborik Rangers, this time with Vokoun in net, establishing the goaltender by committee approach for the season. Then the Penguins lose twice to extremely mediocre Maple Leafs and Jets teams. They hobble past the Senators, then lose to the Islanders, putting them at 3-3. Maybe the departures were more important than I thought. The Penguins immediately shut me up with 5 straight dominant wins. Crosby and Malkin are just beating teams senseless. Good teams. They have 17 and 15 points respectively through 11 games. Crosby, Kunitz, and Dupuis require all the matchup attention, while Malkin just keeps feeding James Neal. That's all before mentioning Chris Letang and Paul Martin, who have gotten even better, though I'm not sure why Bilesma won't play them together very much. The Pens have another stretch of 500 hockey throughout the rest of February. A couple clunkers by Vokoun are the worst of the losses, but that doesn't matter. They're about to take off. On March 2nd, the Penguins begin the second longest winning streak in franchise and NHL history. While the second place of all time marker would eventually fall to the Blue Jackets, March of 2013 would be the peak of the Crosby-Malkin era's regular season dominance. To start the streak against the Canadiens, Mark Eaton is back after a tryout with the Baby Penguins. The Pens go up 4-2 midway through the second, but find themselves down 5-4 before the halfway point of the third. Kunitz and Crosby rip the lead back, but Brian Gionta's immediate retort leaves the game tied. Brandon Sutter, with a bullet in OT, takes the firefight 7-6. The Lightning are next, with Malkin and Crosby erasing a 2-1 deficit in the third before the Pens eventually win 4-3. Then the hated Flyers. It's a disastrous first period for Fleury, after which the Pens are down 4-1, but in comes Vokoun, who blanks Philadelphia for the remaining 2 periods as the Penguins roar back to take the game 5-4. That was the last 3 teams to eliminate the Penguins in order that they just defeated. If you believe in signs, that feels like a strong one. This could be a team of destiny. The next win is a squandered lead against the Leafs, but it's tough to beat Crosby, Neal, and Malkin in the shootout. After the Leafs game, Malkin is out for a decent chunk of time with an upper body injury, and James Neal doesn't do much to shake his reputation as a Malkin merchant, but it doesn't matter. The Penguins dust the Islanders with a Kunitz hat trick and a 5-assist night from Sid. Sutter is clutch again with 2 goals as the Penguins come back from down 2-0 in the third against the big bad Bruins. Leafs again, Pascal Dupuis with the game tire and game winner late in the third, both assisted by Sid and Kunitz, to win 3-1. Fleury shuts out the Rangers, Vokoun allows just 1 against the Bruins, then Fleury allows just 1 against the Caps to make it 10 straight wins. Both goalies are molten. The Isles managed to score twice, but Brandon Sutter nets yet another third-period game winner.
The Sutter scores!
Prior to their game against Philadelphia, the Penguins start to add pieces to their already menacing roster. They ship out former first-round pick Joe Morrow and a 5th for Stars captain Brendan Morrow and a 3rd.
Cross the ice, Robida in front of
Brendan Morrow isn't the 30-goal, 70-point guy he once was. He's very slow, but he's as tough as they come, and he can still play, especially if the Penguins use him to rejuvenate the bottom six. Fleury shows up big against the Flyers, and Sid ties it late before Tyler Kennedy scores to win it in OT. As an aside, it's cool that the Penguins are winning all these games, but I'd feel much better about the streak if they didn't have to come roaring back from behind in nearly all of them. On an off day, the Penguins send a second and a conditional second to San Jose for Douglas Murray, or Crankshaft as he's often known. Few people in the league hit harder than Murray. Few people in the league are slower than Murray. He is a true refrigerator if ever there was one. Split shutout against the Habs, but a minor Fleury injury. Back in deadline mode, and man, it looks like the Bruins just added Jarome Iginla. They're really loading up too. And it only cost them 2 prospects and a first. Wow. I guess I'll go to bed here at 11:24 p.m. on March 27th, 2013. Good morning, everyone. Oh, holy shit, Jarome Iginla's a Penguin? The Pens sent college prospects Ben Hanowski and Kenny Agostino, along with a first-round pick for Sid's Olympic line mate and the face of the Calgary Flames. Shiro doesn't shy away from obtaining stars. He did so with Marian Hossa the year before the Penguins won the Cup, and he has done so now. The Pens, now with a returning Malkin, wallop the Jets thanks to another Vokoun shutout as they wait for Iginla to arrive. Iggy makes his debut against the Islanders, and Orpik just shot Sid in the face. You have to be kidding me. Sid is done for the regular season with a broken jaw, finishing with an astounding 56 points in 35 games and 50 seconds. At least the Pens beat the Isles with another Vokoun shutout. Iginla scores his first as a Penguin, but Pittsburgh gets hammered in their next 2 games by the Sabres and Rangers. The streak ends at 15. Not great. With Crosby out, the Penguins likely need some sort of stopgap at center. Well, Jussi Jokinen is probably going to hit waivers. He's been struggling and his contract isn't great, but the Pens can make the money work with Sid out until the playoffs. Shiro goes to Rutherford, offering Carolina a conditional 7th-round pick to jump the waiver line for Jokinen if Carolina retains salary, which Rutherford happily accepts. When Jokinen, in the Crosby slot in the lineup between Kunitz and Dupuis, scores and has a shootout winner in his first game in the black and gold, it's immediately apparent that Shiro committed grand larceny. 6 more Penguin victories follow that win against the Rangers. With Jokinen, their depth is unmatched as they saw through their opponents. They lose games 46 and 47 on the season, but blow out the once hopeful Hurricanes in the season finale, featuring a hat trick from Neal and 2 goals from Jokinen. Jussi is a slam dunk. Iggy will be once Sid comes back, but he's still nearly at a point per game. Morrow is up near a point per game. Doug Murray isn't great, but whatever. Kunitz, Dupuis, and Neal all hit 20 goals in the shortened season. Crosby still finished 3rd overall in points despite missing a quarter of the year, while Letang finished tied for 1st among defensemen while missing the same amount of time. Vokoun and Fleury are both well above league average in save percentage and outperformed their expected goals against. With Sid back on this fully armed version of the Penguins, they're not just a Stanley Cup contender, they're the favorite. The Penguins finished 1st in the East by a mile, behind only the Blackhawks on loser points for the President's Trophy. As a result, the Pens finally get an easy matchup in the first round, the New York Islanders. Now, as any Penguins fan will tell you, overlooking the Isles can hurt you. Badly. But on paper, this is nowhere near a fair matchup. The Islanders are John Tavares, geriatric Evgeni Nabokov, and some guys. Tavares is a beast. He'll be a Hart finalist at season's end with 28 goals in the 48-game season. Nabokov played 41 games, and the Isles have been riding his generally mediocre play. The rest of the team has some bright spots. Old Mark Streit and old Lubo Wisnowski are still pretty good. Matt Molson can score. Franz Nielsen is a good two-way guy. Michael Grabner's fast, but come on. Kyle Okposo has 4 goals, and he's playing on the second line. Let's be real here. If the Penguins don't crush this team, it will have been a massive, massive disaster. Sid isn't quite ready to go for Game 1, but it's a murder regardless. Bo Bennett opens the scoring, and it's history from there. Nabokov gets pulled for Kevin Poulin. Tanner Glass matches his regular season goal total, and Fleury shuts the Isles out in a 5-0 Penguins victory. That's what I'm talking about. The Pens would lose James Neal for at least Game 2 to injury, but getting Crosby back should make up for it. Malkin, with his strange line of Iginla and Bennett, opens the scoring, and Sid follows suit less than 3 minutes later. It's kind of weird that Bylsma isn't playing him with Iggy at even strength. Molson tries to staunch the bleeding, but Crosby nets another goal just seconds later. The Isles, having been beaten senseless for 4 periods, make a push. They come out strong in the second, and Kyle Okposo goads Niskanen into a fight and bloodies the Penguin. 14 seconds later, Colin McDonald brings New York within 1, and just past the halfway point, Matt Martin scores on a crazy bounce off the end boards. The boards aren't done. Kyle Okposo cements himself as the hero of Game 2, and Dan, you might want to get Vokoun warming up in the pen. Alright, that's not entirely fair. Fleury was very good in Game 1, and perfectly fine other than some freak goals in Game 2. If you want to stick with him, I understand.
One of the Islanders got a stick at it. It's in the net.
I'm not sure I understand anymore. It's getting to be that time here, Dan. But the Penguins, as they are wont to do, respond with bang-bang goals from Iginla and Kunitz. Super Duper, as he is sometimes called, gives the Penguins the lead before the end of the period. I was once again being too harsh on Fleury. Doug Murray is scoring. I need to lighten up. Man, what a goal by Okposo.
Stays outside and he scores!
It's the Islanders' franchise player who ties the game late. But in OT, Crosby to Kunitz to win.
Crosby now a chance. Score! Kunitz! Chris Kunitz!
That was closer than it ever should have been, but hey, up 2-0 in the series against a far inferior team. All good. No sweat. Game 4 on Long Island, former Penguin depth defenseman Brian Straight lobs a shot past Fleury that I think Letang deflected. Though it's a bad start, the Pens, as they often do, respond immediately.
Immediately?
With James Neal scoring within the minute on a feed from Iggy and Malkin. Something of note, Iginla, playing with Neal and Malkin, is swapped to left wing, his offside. Iggy has carved out his legendary resume entirely on the right side, but with the Penguins fully healthy, Bosma is stuck with Dupuis on Sid's right wing as opposed to trying Iginla there. While I understand keeping Kunitz, Crosby, Dupuis together, it's a strange decision to switch a 35-year-old future Hall of Famer's position. But hold on, Jerome will play with Crosby some throughout the series, but still on his offside with Dupuis on the right. The Isles take back the lead on a blast right into Fleury's chest from Captain Mark Streit. Something, the Penguins score less than a minute after the bad goal, blah blah. I said it before, but it'd be really cool if the Penguins could have a lead and hold it. I'd enjoy that, personally.
Goal of the postseason, big hit by Cook on Hamonic. Now Sutter with a shot, score!
Hey, thanks, Brandon. What are you doing, Mark? No, dude, don't go to your post. Just poke your stick out there. That'll do it. His confidence is shattered. Fleury's an emotional guy. He's completely in his own head. Any goalie that's remotely on his A game doesn't get caught for a goal like that. But Bylsma sends Fleury out for the third, despite having Vokoun specifically for this type of game. I get it. It's tied. It's only 3-3. Dupuis gets to the Isles immediately. I would normally say that's a sigh of relief, but I don't even know anymore.
Now Streit with a shot, he scores!
Is this worse than the Flyers series? It can't be, right?
You know, everybody blames Marc-Andre Fleury for that series, and he was not great in that series. I acknowledge that. But how many of the goals were tap-ins?
John Tavares gives the Isles the lead and blows the roof off Nassau Coliseum.
Tavares moves in front, big save, rebound, and scores!
The Penguins put themselves in this position, a position where one great player can change a game, a series.
Vazikis scores from a tough angle. 6-4 Islanders.
What am I supposed to say anymore? Seriously? Make the call, Dan. In the postgame, the AP write-up describes Bylsma as non-committal, but from the praise he has for his backup, it's obvious. Game 5 will be Vokoun's chance to save the Penguins. No Jokinen for Game 5. He's a combination of beat up and without a place in the lineup, with no one sure which is the larger factor for his absence. The Czech netminder is extremely solid, weathering an early push from the inspired Isles. The Penguins finally break the tie off a home run pass from Chris Letang to Tyler Kennedy. Evgeni Nabokov has dodged a lot of criticism given that he plays for a worse team and has been the better goalie, but he's not been good at all. Deadly sniper Douglas Murray lengthens the lead. Then Sid does what Sid does.
And for Dupree, and now Iginla with Crosby. Crosby switched through. He scores!
Vokoun gives the Islanders nothing, and with Chris Letang making it 4-0 early in the third, it's over. No, really, the Penguins don't choke. There's no Islanders comeback. 4-0. Vokoun shutout. The first playoff series in Penguin history where they had 2 shutouts, which seems like it can't be possible, but is still cool. New York is firing on all cylinders to start Game 6, and the Islanders' beloved franchise face John Tavares opens the scoring. But, and stop me if you've heard this one before, the Penguins respond. You know what? I'm glad they respond. They could just not. This is a shockingly resilient team. A nice passing play by the Isles late in the first catches Orpik out of position, and once again the Penguins must muster a counterattack. Dupuis is the game tire on a pass from Joe Vitale. The next goal isn't until the third, when Letang gets obliterated by Colin McDonald, who commences a passing play that Michael Grabner finishes. It's an unlikely hero that sends the game to OT.
Evgeni Malkin out to Paul Martin, scores! The Penguins tie the game with 5:16.
Martin's goal prompts a strange roar. The cheer from a decent amount of Penguins fans in attendance, with the forlorn groan of the, to this point, raucous Islander faithful. And if you think Paul Martin was an unlikely hero, just wait until you see who wins it.
Now Orpik with a drive, he scores! Brooks Orpik.
Orpik is the longest tenured Penguin. He played alongside Alex Kovalev the first time. During his debut, Alexander Daig was a Pen. But this is his first ever playoff goal. A series winner. A massive win for the Penguins, who had fear in their hearts and flashbacks from 2012 playing in their minds. Vokoun has taken the net. Now who will the Penguins face in round 2? The Penguins, actually, already know who they're playing, as the second seed Montreal Canadiens lost in 5 games to the lowly 7th seeded Ottawa Senators, locking in the matchup for the Pens. The Senators somehow hobbled into the playoffs despite their 2 best players, defending Norris winner Erik Karlsson and top center Jason Spezza both missing the vast majority of the season. The Sens are under the tutelage of the mustachioed and soon-to-be Jack Adams winner Paul McLean.
We don't really care about what that bug-eyed fat walrus has to say.
Whose genius strategy was imploring his goaltending trio of Craig Anderson, Ben Bishop, and Robin Lehner to stop all the pucks. And boy did they listen, finishing 3rd, 9th, and 20th in goals saved above expected, which is just absurd for 3 guys on the same team. Bishop has since departed and accumulated some of his G-Sacks as a member of the Lightning after he was traded for young star Corey Conacher, but Anderson is the guy for the Sens here in the playoffs. Andy ate the also goalie-reliant Habs alive in the first round, allowing just 9 goals and boasting a .950 save percentage in the 5-game series. What's more is that .950 mark isn't entirely absurd, as Anderson led the league with a .941 save in the regular season. He is on fire, and he is the Sens' best chance to win this series. Skater-wise, the Sens don't have much. Karlsson is back and healthy, finally recovered from Matt Cook stepping on his Achilles in a freak accident everybody was really chill and normal about. Aside from him, there's the elderly Daniel Alfredsson, who is still decent, Kyle Turris, who led the team in points and goals with 29 and 12, Sergei Gonchar, who served as the Sens' number 1 with Karlsson injured despite being pretty close to cooked, then, like the Isles, a smattering of guys. The interesting but very young, like Jakob Silfverberg, Mika Zibanejad, and JG Pajot, and the proven but meh, like Chris Phillips, Milan Michalek, and Chris Neal. Spezza could potentially come back in this series. That would be a big shift, and oh man, Peter Regan's still around. Oh, never mind. He had 0 goals and 3 assists in 27 games and didn't play against the Habs. Whew. Overall, the Sens are probably worse than the Isles at every position except goalie. But sometimes that's the only position that matters. The Penguins waste no time establishing dominance, drawing a penalty and scoring on the subsequent power play. Boy, Brandon Morrow looks really hobbled, even just celebrating. He had just 1 assist against the Isles after going a point per game between the deadline and the end of the regular season. He's always been slow. Has he always been this slow? Colin Greening pickle stabs a goal home for Ottawa, and that's all she wrote for the Sens. The Penguins, as they were against the Isles, are the far better team. They score the next 3 goals as the Sens don't get the heroics they're accustomed to from Anderson. 4-1, and this series could be quick. Game 2 is all Crosby, starting with him cruising by Erik Karlsson to open the scoring.
And up against Sidney Crosby, who gets through, scores!
The Pens proceed to dominate the first until Kyle Turris scores on the power play to tie it, but optimism in Ottawa doesn't last long as Crosby once again beats Karlsson and Anderson. Early in the second, the Penguins captain continues to torture his future teammate as Karlsson takes a hooking penalty and Crosby blisters a shot past Anderson to complete his hat trick and end the goalie's night. In comes Robin Lehner, the gigantic Swede who has been quite good this season. Colin Greening, who is trying to become the hero of this series, cuts the differential to 1 within the minute. Lehner plays well in relief, but still gives up a goal to Brendan Morrow, which proves to be the game winner. Pajot's late goal gave the Sens some hope, but the Pens are a dominating force. Without the terrific goaltending they've gotten all season, this Ottawa squad is not even playoff caliber, let alone capable of taking on the top team in the East. Anderson returns to form in Game 3, but there's Vokoun matching him every step of the way. Spezza has returned for the Sens, but who knows how much rust he'll have. The game marches deep into the second period without a goal. It takes a perfect shot from Tyler Kennedy to break the scoreless tie, and 1-0 Penguins is how it remains for the next 20 minutes. With Erik Karlsson in the box for slashing, the game is all but over.
Coming on to even things up. To the net, Albertson scores!
In a moment, the Sens season went from over to rejuvenated. The goalies continue to shine into overtime, but it's a familiar face that ends it. Anderson ends Game 3 with 49 saves on 50 shots. He's back. Game 4 will define the rest of this series. Milan Michalek sets the tone with a terrific individual effort. Anderson is in peak form once again as the Pens assail him, but finally James Neal rips one past. But Ottawa is revitalized. They're not dead yet.
Karlsson does to the net. There's a rebound. Loose puck, score! Kyle Turris got it.
If the Pens really are as great as they seem to be, they need to respond in the second. Kunitz, Iginla, and the air is sucked out of the building. Ottawa already gave all they have. The Penguins are just on a different level. The Pens bludgeon the Senators in the third. Anderson is pulled again as the game ends 7-3. Back at Consol Energy Center for Game 5, and I don't think anybody has a question as to how this will go. When Brendan Morrow scores on what probably could have been called a kick, it's clear everything is coming up Penguins. Anderson fights to keep his team in the game, but goals from Neal and Letang build an impossible mountain to climb. Michalek scores, but the glimmer of hope his goal provides lasts only a few minutes before Malkin makes it 4-1.
Now here's Malkin, sent in alone, scores!
2 goals to complete the hat trick from Neal nullify a Kyle Turris goal in the third period. The Penguins have completed their bulldozing of the Senators on their path to the Final Four, but their easy road is over. The 4 remaining teams are the league's 4 most recent champions. The defending champs, the LA Kings, and 2010's winner, the Chicago Blackhawks in the West, and the 2009 winning Penguins matched up against the 2011 Cup champion, Boston Bruins. The Penguins have a good chunk of their Stanley Cup winning roster still present, a little less than half the lineup. But given the recency of their Cup win, this Bruins team is nearly identical to 2011, with a few key differences. Krejci, Lucic, and Horton are still the terrors they were in 2011. The defense, led by Zdeno Chara, is still there and solid as ever. There's a random old guy that won his first cup with the Penguins, and except this time, instead of the wrecking ball, it's...
And my favorite player growing up was Jaromir Jagr.
Hi, I'm Jaromir Jagr from Kladno, Czech Republic. My favorite player growing up was Jaromir Jagr.
Hi again, Yogs. And of course, there's matchup nightmare Patrice Bergeron. The Bruins have also seen their young players make massive strides since 2011, with Brad Marchand and Tyler Seguin establishing themselves as stars. The skaters for this team are probably better than they were in 2011, but the team's most drastic change came in net. Back in 2007, 33-year-old Tim Thomas decided essentially out of nowhere that he would be Dominik Hasek. He won his first Vezina in 2009, then won his second for his 2011 regular season, but was somehow even better in the 2011 playoffs, winning the Conn Smythe and lifting the cup. But here in 2013, Thomas decided he was taking a year off. The Bruins traded him to the Isles for conditional picks, but he obviously didn't play for them either. Now, for 29 other teams, losing maybe the best goalie in the league would be devastating. But the Bruins are honestly okay. They have Tuukka Rask.
Back to Greer, and a save by Rask. How about that for a save?
Rask was pilfered from the Leafs back during the summer of Jeff Gorton and exploded onto the scene in 2010 as Thomas was sidelined with a hip injury. Rask led the league in both save percentage and goals against average that year, but in the playoffs, his implosion against the Flyers was a major part of the Bruins being reverse swept, tacking the choker label on him for the rest of his career in the eyes of some fans. Rask slotted in as the backup in 2011 and 12, but with Thomas absent, the Finn took the starter mantle once again in 2013 and ran with it. He was terrific in the shortened regular season and was as good as anyone could have asked against the Leafs and Rangers through the first two rounds. Tuukka's the X factor. Will he rise to the occasion, or will he choke again? It's the Penguins' firepower against the Bees' defensive acumen. Unstoppable force, immovable object. Console. Game 1. The Pens come out firing in the first, but it's a bleeder from Krejci that gets past Vokoun to open the scoring. Pittsburgh doesn't falter. The Pens continue firing on Rask, but the closest they get to a goal in the first is an extremely narrow miss by Malkin. To start the second, Matt Cook still has some Matt Cook in him.
The first man back for Boston, slammed against the boards and hurt by Matt Cook.
Cook is tossed. What a cool throwback to the good old days. Plenty of chances both ways throughout the rest of the second, but in the waning moments of the period, the Pens make their big push. The temperature is already an extreme high with Crosby and Chara jawing, but it's the unlikely pairing of Bergeron and Malkin throwing down at the end of the period. A statement by Gino, who has been soaring throughout the game. He's due. He's going to take over. The problem, however, with your stars fighting, is that it keeps them off the ice for 5 minutes. Before Malkin can get back out on the ice, Krejci strikes again. Letang and Niskanen get lost just a few minutes later, and Horton makes it 3-0, a near insurmountable deficit for the Pens against these Bruins. Boston gives the Penguins no room to breathe for the remainder of the third, neutralizing their high flyers. 1-0 Bruins on the back of a Rask shutout. Marchand scores immediately in Game 2. It doesn't get much better. Horton starts a Bruins onslaught with a goal late in the first. Is Douglas Murray skating in mud? Lucic, not exactly a speedster, is just blowing by him. The camera cuts to Fleury on the bench, and in he comes. It's not entirely Vokoun's fault, but I can't blame Bylsma for making the call. Mr. Clutch, Brandon Sutter, staunches the bleeding with a snipe off the rush. The Pens are back. They'll start the next frame down just 2.
1926 as Marchand shoots and scores!
It was a nice shot, but you gotta make that save, right? Am I just being a hater? Comment down below your thoughts. If I'm being a hater, comment, wow, Ben, I didn't know you could slander Fleury in such an egregious way. If I'm not being a hater, comment, you're actually not a hater, IMO, TBH, for real, for real. Rask is on another planet. Maybe it's score effect, given that the Bruins are up 3 goals, but the Penguins outchance the Bees significantly. They just have nothing to show for it. The Bruins score number 5 on a play that Mark didn't have a chance on, and a 6th on a blast from Johnny Boychuk. The Pens are down 2-0 in the series, heading to Boston. Bylsma goes with a pretty non-controversial decision for Game 3 by going back to Vokoun. You gotta dance with the person that brought you. Krejci catches him for a not-so-great goal.
3 Penguins on him. They score!
But from there on, it's a battle. Vokoun is locked in, and at this point, it should be no surprise that Rask is nigh on unbeatable. The Penguins are playing with the desperation of a team with their backs against the wall. They aren't just going to roll over and die. Kunitz ties it on a terrific feed from offensive juggernaut Paul Martin. From that goal on, it's a battle between two players, Vokoun and Rask. Chance after chance is knocked aside, and the game marches into OT. Still nothing. Late in the second OT, Malkin muscles Jagr off the puck, but the legend proceeds to hook Gino into oblivion and steals it back. The Bruins head Vokoun's way. Bergeron game winner. Zombie Nation rings out through TD Garden. All hope is lost. Game 4 reflects the series as a whole. Vokoun is great, Rask is better, and the Penguins just can't score. The Bruins continue to devour the Penguins defensively. Adam McQuaid scores the only goal of the game with the best shot of his career. The dominant Penguins have been devastated by the Bruins. A death so swift, it was almost painless.
I think it was 24 hours after the last game. I received an email from a member of the Penguins who I will not disclose. And he literally sent me like a 2-page email breaking down and explaining like why these new guys didn't work out and what the problem was. And basically what was said was, yeah, they were good players. They were too slow. And they just made the Penguins a way slower hockey team. Everyone always asks, why didn't Jerome Iginla play on Sidney Crosby's right wing? I'll tell you why, because Sid thought he was too slow and he didn't want to play with him. That's why. And I'm not saying that was the right decision on Sid's part. Sid was comfortable playing with Pascal Dupuis and Chris Kunitz, and Dupuis in particular on the right side could fly. That's who he wanted to play with. He loved Iginla. He played with him in the Olympics. He was happy they got him, but he didn't feel like he meshed well with him. The Penguins didn't need all those guys, and you can do that sometimes as a general manager, right? Like you could have the best team in the league. Sometimes it's just the best team in the league. Just leave it be. And one of the reasons the Penguins got Iginla, not that they didn't like him, they did, but Boston was trying to get Iginla, and that was the team the Penguins really feared in the East. And they didn't want him to go to Boston. So they, made a better offer to Calgary and they got him. But sometimes it's better just to focus on yourself and not to play that game. And I think Ray Shero, by the way, I think he's a great general manager. I don't blame him for anything that went wrong in those seasons. I think on paper, he gave the Penguins the best team in the league probably 4 or 5 years. And that's his job. And that's exactly what he did. He's a great GM in Pittsburgh. That was the one year that we probably went a little overboard with some of those deals.
Once again, the Penguins failed to adjust. 2 goals in 4 games is unacceptable. I don't care how good Rask or Chara or Bergeron are. It's unacceptable. It's starting to awaken a thought in my mind. Is Dan Bylsma a bad coach? He won the Jack Adams just 2 years ago. He can't be bad. Can he? I mean, Paul McLean just won, so does that award even mean anything? The Penguins are so talented that they can just bulldoze mediocre teams like the Isles and Sens. As I've said before, during the regular season, teams aren't paying as much attention. They can't pick at the Pens' systemic flaws. I don't think Dan is a bad coach necessarily, but he certainly didn't look as good as Claude Julien. I just don't see him in that upper echelon of coaches in this league. Bylsma is a dedicated tactician but struggles with making tweaks and shifts in those tactics. This was the team. This was the best roster of the Crosby-Malkin era, and they got slaughtered by a good team, but not an all-time great squad. If this had happened against the Hawks or Kings in the final, okay, sure. Those are multiple cup-winning rosters, and you also would have had to have beaten a real contender to get there. As it stands, the Penguins cruised by an 8 and 7 seed and got absolutely pulverized when they met a team that had good forwards, good defensemen, and a good goalie. Despite this being a deep run, the way it ended makes it feel like a colossal failure.
He sends it ahead, picked up by Malkin. He's behind the defense. Malkin in on Lundqvist. He scores! He burns Lundqvist on the backhand to make it 1-0.